There is a moment when the world around you stops feeling like a heavy, fixed machine and starts behaving like something alive, responsive, intimate. Almost as if the air itself leans closer when you speak within. If you've ever felt trapped by circumstances, haunted by patterns that repeat no matter how hard you try to outwork them, you know the ache of believing that matter is deaf to your longing. But what if your life has never been ignoring you, only mirroring a field you didn't know you were broadcasting? What if the space around you is not empty at all, but a shimmering ocean of possibility waiting for the slightest instruction from your inner state? Tonight, you will hear a different language, the language of particles and fields, where your attention is not just a flashlight. It is the switch that tells reality what shape to take next. Imagine walking into a room and feeling, without knowing why, that everything is already decided how it will go. Conversations drift where they always drift. Opportunities feel just out of reach. Even your own thoughts seem pre-written. That sense of inevitability is the weight of an unexamined field. The truth, uncomfortable at first, liberating soon after, is that matter organizes itself around the invisible pattern you carry. Your quantum field is the preface to every scene. The particles are simply the words that appear because the preface demanded them. When the field is noisy with fear, the world crystallizes into proofs of danger. When the field is tuned to coherence, life hardens into doors that open at your touch. This is not wishful thinking. This is field before form, observation before outcome, signal before substance. And once you feel it in your body, once you sense particles obeying the quiet command of your awareness, you will never again mistake delay for fate. If you've been told to think positive while your nervous system trembles, you already know why surface advice fails. The body broadcasts what the mouth denies. The field listens to the deeper frequency, not the polished story. That is why we begin where most people end, with the mechanics of how particles choose, why waves collapse under your gaze, and how a felt state, steady, coherent, lived, reprograms the very probabilities that arrange your days. I will speak to you as if you were a child who deserves clarity and as a creator who deserves reverence. We will move slowly at first, then precisely, until the strange becomes simple. Change the field, and the particles have no choice. I am not here to entertain your hope. I am here to awaken your authority. In the minutes that follow, you will learn why reality seems to repeat, how to interrupt that repetition at the smallest scale, and how to stabilize a signal that makes synchronicity ordinary. We will navigate from theory to embodiment, from idea to chemistry to behavior, until you can feel the moment a possibility hardens into presence. If a part of you is already leaning forward, it is because the field around you recognizes its own name in what I am saying. That recognition is the beginning of the collapse. That pull you feel is the next version of you, already assembled in potential, inviting you to step into its gravity. If this resonates, even as a whisper, pause and do one simple thing: subscribe now. Not for vanity, not for numbers, but to anchor a decision in time that says, I am choosing mastery over drift. I am ready to shape my field and watch the particles obey. What comes next will show you how. Before anything touches your calendar, your bank account, your skin, or your reputation, it touches your field. This is the part most people never learn to see, not because it is complicated, but because it is quiet. We are trained to worship the loud solidity of results. The message received, the bill paid, the door opened or closed, while ignoring the invisible pattern that arranged those results in the first place. Yet, at every scale of reality, from subatomic dance to the choreography of a life. Form follows field. That simple reversal is the key. What you live is not the cause of how you feel. How you feel is the template your life hardens around. Change the template and the hardening must change. Think of the quantum field as the pre-weather of your days, an atmosphere of probability that presses gently on every conversation and decision before either one begins. When that atmosphere is thick with static, old fear humming in the background, stale conclusions about what always happens to you, subtle dread that tightens the breath, then even good situations acquire the taste of threat. People misread you. Emails arrive a shade colder. You stand in a room and somehow shrink, and the room obliges by treating you as smaller. Nothing mystical is required to understand this. Your body broadcasts a signature the way a radio tower broadcasts a song. Other nervous systems entrain to it. Opportunities either approach or hesitate. A possibility senses whether it will be welcomed into coherence or shatter against contradiction, and it behaves accordingly. You call this luck. Your field calls it physics with a human face. To feel how field precedes form, notice the instant before you act. You are about to make a call and two futures hover. One where your words land and open something, one where they tangle and close it. In the uncounted second before you dial, your inner world chooses a weather. If you collapse around rejection, your throat narrows, your cadence strains, your timing turns brittle. You hear yourself from far away and watch the conversation tilt toward the very end you feared. And you leave convinced the world confirmed your belief. But if you pause at that same doorway and tune to steadiness, if you breathe until your chest remembers ease and your attention softens around the outcome, your voice carries a different geometry. The facts may be identical, same script, same minutes, same person on the other end. But the field's geometry has changed, and the particles of the moment rearranged to match it. The difference is not theatrical confidence. It is coherence, the interior agreement that stops leaking static into the scene. We are used to patching form with form, new plans to fix old results, new words to paste over old fears, new strategies to outmaneuver old identities. Sometimes that works for a morning, rarely for a season. The field remains unaddressed, and so the world patiently recreates the only story it has, instructions for. This is why effort feels like pushing a boulder uphill, while a single moment of real alignment feels like stepping onto a moving walkway. Alignment is not passivity. It is correct sequencing. You tune the field first and allow action to become the physical trace of a decision your being already made. Then work stops being a negotiation with fate and becomes the natural crystallization of a chosen pattern. You can test this without philosophy. Walk into a familiar space where you habitually feel less than: an office, a family dinner, a mirror, and do not touch anything external. Touch the field. Before crossing the threshold, recall a memory in which you were unmistakably effective or deeply loved. Not to inflate your ego, but to borrow the biochemistry of that scene. Let your breath lengthen and your eyes rest on the middle distance. Feel how your muscles reorganize around the idea that you belong. Notice the tiny loosening in your jaw, the unforced width of your stance, the cadence that slows by a fraction. That is the field switching channels. Now enter the same room. It will not explode into fireworks, but small particles of the moment will betray a difference. The way someone meets your gaze a heartbeat longer, the joke that lands instead of falters, the task that seems to volunteer its first step. You did not recite brighter sentences. You changed the precondition that sentences and glances and tasks had to obey. The part of you that has suffered will ask for guarantees. It will say, "Prove to me the world will change first, and then I will risk a new signal." That is the field's oldest trap, because it freezes you in a contract with your past. Your nervous system learned to equate safety with anticipation. So you keep broadcasting the frequency of waiting and get exquisitely accurate reflections of delay. The escape hatch is not grand bravado. It is a small, repeated willingness to broadcast a state before you have evidence for it. Not fantasy, not denial, precision. Calm before clarity. Gratitude before gain. Belonging before permission. When you hold those states long enough to become believable to your own body, you are not pretending. You are furnishing the blueprint that matter requires in order to settle into a new shape around you. This is also why intellectual positivity exhausts you. The mind can compose an excellent story, while the belly whispers panic and the heart stutters with doubt. The field listens to the orchestra, not to the soloist. When your thoughts, emotions, and physiology play different songs, the universe hears dissonance and struggles to resolve it. Particles look for the dominant motif and often find fear louder than hope. But when a single feeling, steady relief for example, begins to harmonize breath, pulse, posture, and inner dialogue, the song becomes unmistakable, and experience begins to conspire with it. In that music, strangers extend more trust. Stalled projects unstick, random links appear at just the right hour. You call it momentum. At the particle level, it is simply a field that stopped contradicting itself. None of this absolves you from action. It refines action into something worthy of your energy. From the outside, you may appear busier on days when your field is coherent, because coherent people tend to move when movement is alive and rest when rest is clean. The difference is that action feels like continuity rather than compensation. Instead of trying to purchase outcomes with strain, you allow your behavior to be the tangible edge of a signal you already stabilized within. That is why the same task that once drained you suddenly completes itself in half the time with twice the quality. You are no longer dragging matter uphill. You are letting matter fall into the groove you carved in the invisible. If you are tempted to argue that life is more complicated than fields and feelings, you are correct. It is richer than any model. You will still meet other people's weather, larger systems, timing you do not control. But even there, field before form remains the sanest way to navigate. Your coherence does not guarantee every door opens. It guarantees you recognize the doors that belong to you and stop bruising yourself against the ones that don't. It does not erase pain. It prevents pain from metastasizing into identity. It does not remove uncertainty. It gives you a stable center from which uncertainty becomes information instead of threat. So the invitation is radical in its humility. Before you chase the next outcome, pause and rearrange the space it would have to inhabit. Ask yourself what emotion would be native to that outcome, and practice it honestly for 1 minute longer than your history thinks is reasonable. Let your breath become the metronome of the future you are selecting. Let your shoulders tell the room that you expect to belong there. Let your tone carry the unhurried cadence of someone who trusts their own timing. Particles cannot help but listen. They are not loyal to your past. They are loyal to your present signal. And the moment your field changes, your life begins to show the first shy evidence of a world that was always waiting for permission to take a different shape. There is a hinge inside every moment, a tiny pivot where the invisible tips into the visible, where the unsaid becomes event, where a possibility hardens and takes a seat at your table. I call that hinge the particle switch. It is not a button you press with your hand. It is a function of attention. When your awareness settles, clean, steady, coherent, on a possibility, the field stops offering you a cloud of maybes and begins to assemble a single scene. The wave becomes a particle, not in a textbook miles away from your life, but in the cadence of your voice on a call, in the timing of an email, in the way a stranger's eyes decide to trust you for one more heartbeat than they otherwise would. We are taught to look for big proof, but the particle switch announces itself first in small physics. A breath that changes a conversation, a posture that changes a room, a sentence that lands where its twin used to miss. To feel this in the most ordinary way, remember a moment you were about to speak a difficult truth. Two futures hovered in your mouth. In one, the truth came out jagged and triggered a recoil. In the other, it arrived whole and opened a door. Before a single word escaped, your body voted. If you observed the outcome called rejection, your shoulders crept forward, your tones sharpened by a degree you couldn't hear. Your eyes asked permission from the floor, and the world obliged by stiffening in response. But if you took 3 unhurried breaths and observed the outcome called clarity, something subtler happened. Your chest softened, your gaze steadied, your words carried neither apology nor aggression, and the person in front of you found themselves answering a question you hadn't asked out loud. Is it safe to meet you here? At that scale, particles are not abstract dots on a detector. They are micro-choices inside a human exchange, crystallizing around the expectation you hold. Your observation was the switch. The scene that followed was the particle. This is why trying to bully reality with thought alone feels brittle. Thought is fast, but unless it recruits emotion and physiology, it is just one quiet vote in a noisy room. The field listens to the composite. When your mind says, "This will work," while your breath says, "Brace," and your gut whispers, "Run," you are sending 3 conflicting measurements to the same experiment. The particle does not know which instruction to obey, so it collapses into the most dominant signal, which, for most people most of the time, is the body's alarm. You leave the moment telling yourself that life confirmed your doubts, when in truth, the field simply obeyed the loudest instruction you gave it. The particle switch is exquisitely fair. It is not personal. It is responsive. When you remove the contradiction, when the sentence, the heartbeat, and the posture all carry the same music, matter stops hesitating. It settles finally into the shape you selected. You can watch this at work in places we rarely honor as sacred. In your calendar, in your inbox, in the doorways you walk through every day. You set a meeting dreading conflict, and all morning your attention measures the outcome called, "This is going to be hard." By the time you sit down, your field has wallpapered the room with arguments that haven't happened yet. People feel it the way birds feel weather. They come armed. The same topic on a different day meets a different observer. You arrive choosing to measure what wants to work here, and your pacing slows, the edges blur. Someone remembers a path no one named last week, and the conversation takes that path because particles prefer the low-resistance route. The facts did not change. The measurement did. The switch flipped. Skeptical parts of you may demand, "So I just pick the best feeling and everything rearranges?" Not quite. The particle switch is not a fantasy lever. It is a precision instrument. You are not pretending outcomes into existence. You are selecting which outcome you are willing to be congruent with. Congruence is the key. If you choose the measurement, "I am respected here," but your body still carries the flinch of old rooms where you weren't. Then for now, the switch hears the flinch. This is not failure, it is feedback. It tells you where the field needs attention before the particle can obey. Instead of forcing, you refine. You breathe until your ribs stop guarding. You stand as if the floor belongs to you because it does. You let your voice take up its proper timbre. In that honest sequence, belief turns into biochemistry, and biochemistry turns into behavior. And behavior is simply the particle wearing your signal like a suit. There is a beautiful and humbling corollary to this. The switch is continuous. You are not offered one dramatic lever to pull once a quarter. You are offered 1,000 micro switches an hour. Every time you choose to stare at a problem as an immovable wall, the field receives the instruction, remain wall, and the particle holds. Every time you soften your gaze and ask, what specifically is alive here? You change the measurement from wall to seam, and seams invite hands. On some afternoons, the only particle worth collapsing is a single next sentence, one that moves a conversation 1 degree toward oxygen. On some mornings, the particle is a decision to move your body before you move your day. Because a body that remembers rhythm will choose cleaner measurements for the hours that follow. Nothing mystical is required to honor this. Only the discipline to notice which reality you are measuring before you try to fix it. You have already used the switch in ways you forgot to credit yourself for. Think of a time you got lucky finding a parking space in a city that never has any. You rounded a corner with the exhale of someone who expected a spot to reveal itself, perhaps because it often does for you, perhaps because you decided to act as if it would this time. And the space appeared with theatrical timing. You told the story later as if the world had slipped you a favor. What if you were the one who removed the contradiction from the request? Your attention stopped broadcasting. There are no spots, and the field no longer needed to hand you evidence of that belief. You chose a different measurement and simple matter. Painted lines on asphalt, the timing of another driver's departure, fell into your choice. Scale that up or down as far as you wish. The principle is the same, whether the particle is a parking space, a sentence, a signature, or a season of your life. The most compassionate use of the particle switch is with the parts of you that are sure you cannot change. Those parts are not enemies. They are librarians. They recite the catalog of everything that ever hurt and warn you away from repeating it. If you submit your measurements to them without question, you will live in a museum of proof. If instead you thank them for their inventory and then choose to measure, this time can be different. You do not erase their data, you place it in context. The field hears both signals and asks, which is dominant? If you cannot make hope louder yet, make it steadier. Hold it for 30 seconds longer than your history thinks you can. Breathe until the body's vote shifts from brace to watch. The moment it does, the switch flips, and the next minute of your life enters wearing different clothes. There is a final grace hidden in all of this. You do not have to hold the right measurement all day. You do not have to be perfect. Reality is mercifully plastic and refreshes constantly. If you fumble the morning and collapse outcomes that taste like yesterday, you are one clean breath away from a different noon. If the meeting hardens and you feel the old story win, you can choose, in the quiet after, to measure. I learned something true about my field today, instead of, I always ruin this. That measurement is not consolation, it is craftsmanship. It stops the error from metastasizing. It sends different instructions forward, and the afternoon begins to obey a gentler architect. The particle switch is not somewhere out there in equations that never touch your skin. It is in your next inhale, in the way you pick up your phone, in the decision to stand up before you write back. in the permission you give your voice to reach its natural depth, in the humility to choose relief over drama when relief is available. Observe the outcome you are willing to embody, and let matter fall into place. The universe is not grading your worth. It is reading your signal. If thought is the architect, emotion is the electricity that turns the lights on. You can draft the most elegant blueprint in your mind. You can rehearse sentences and plan moves and visualize outcomes until the screen inside your head glows. But if the body is broadcasting a different weather, the field obeys the body. This is not a betrayal of your intellect. It is the mercy of a universe that privileges truth over performance. Emotional coherence is simply truth made measurable. It is the moment your heart's rhythm, your breath's cadence, your posture's quiet confidence, and your inner language agree on the same story. When that agreement happens, even for 30 sincere seconds, the signal you emit stops flickering. The field no longer has to guess which version of you to mirror. Particles receive a single instruction, and the world begins to resolve around it with a speed that looks like luck to anyone who wasn't there to feel the shift. Most people try to program reality with words while their nervous system whispers the opposite. They say, "I'm fine," but their diaphragm is locked. They say, "I trust," but their eyes keep scanning for exits. They say, "I belong," but their shoulders apologize for taking up space. The field listens to the choir, not the soloist. Emotional coherence begins the instant you stop pleading and start assembling your internal voices into harmony. This is not about manufacturing a mood. It is about choosing a state that would be native to the outcome you desire and letting your physiology experience it first. If you are calling in clarity, the native state is relief. If you are calling in abundance, the native state is quiet sufficiency. If you are calling in love, the native state is safety. You do not force these states by grinning at a mirror. You invite them by shaping the body the way truth would shape it once the prayer is answered. Begin with breath, because breath is the steering wheel you were born holding. Inhale as if you have time. Exhale as if something in you finally believes you will be met. Let your exhale be longer than your inhale by a count or two. Not to hack yourself, but to signal to ancient circuitry that the tiger is not in the room. Feel how the belly softens, how the tongue unglues from the roof of the mouth, how the eyes stop trying to drink the future before it arrives. This is coherence beginning, not as fireworks, but as an increase in signal to noise. Now borrow one memory that proves your system can feel what you are asking it to feel. The day a weight lifted, the call that said yes, the hand that stayed, not to live in the past, but to show your body a reference image it already trusts. When the body recognizes the feeling, it will help you hold it. This is not pretend. It is rehearsal for a reality your field is about to request. As breath and memory align, let your posture tell the same truth. Sit or stand as if gravity were a friend, not a verdict. Let your sternum lift a few millimeters, not in puffed-up defiance, but in unforced presence. Let your feet widen just enough for the ground to feel like an ally. Notice how this simple geometry edits your thoughts without a fight. Panic sentences lose their authority when the body refuses to curl around them. The mind, relieved of emergency, becomes available to precision. It will begin to select words that match your state rather than sabotage it. A coherent body lends its rhythm to the mind, and the mind returns the favor by choosing interpretations that keep the rhythm intact. This is the loop you want. Physiology stabilizing psychology, stabilizing physiology, a self-reinforcing waveform the field can read from across a crowded day. You will be tempted to check if it is working. You will look up from your inner work and scan the world for immediate proof. The moment you do, the signal fractures. Coherence is not a test you pass. It is a station you transmit from. Stay with the feeling as a decision, not a negotiation. Practice the discipline of letting small confirmations land without grabbing them. When the message arrives with better news than expected, allow a soft smile, then return to the station. When a door opens that stayed shut last week, nod to the symmetry, then return to the station. The point is not to ignore evidence. The point is to prevent your state from becoming hostage to evidence. Make the inner signal cause and the outer synchronicity effect, not the other way around. The field respects consistency. It will feed whichever loop you feed. Emotional coherence is also how you disarm old patterns without declaring war on yourself. When an ancient fear spikes, it is not proof that you failed. It is proof that the next layer has presented itself for integration. Instead of reciting brighter sentences over the alarm, bring the alarm into coherence. Name it as sensation, heat in the chest, buzz in the limbs, tightness in the jaw. So the mind cannot inflate it into prophecy. Breathe until the edges blur. Ask the body, what would this feel like if it were safe to experience? Then give it 30 seconds of exactly that safety. As the signal steadies, you are teaching your system that it can feel fully without losing the station. That lesson is worth more than any affirmation because it makes your state portable. You can carry it into rooms that used to steal it. On the days when you cannot find gratitude big enough to light the house, choose something smaller and more honest. The sensation of the chair holding you, the miracle of air doing its quiet work, the relief in one muscle that just let go. Coherence does not require grandeur. It requires agreement. 10 square inches of sincere ease will overpower a room full of theatrical optimism, because sincerity is stable and theater is noisy. Let that small ease expand at its own pace. If all you can hold is one coherent minute at a time, stitch those minutes together. A life is built of minutes. The field does not count the volume of your emotion. It reads the clarity. Eventually, you will notice that coherence has a sound. Your voice drops into its native register. The rush to interrupt or over-explain dissolves. You leave more air between your words. People listen differently, not because you learned a trick, but because the body knows how to trust a signal that is not wobbling. You will also notice that coherence has a smell. Rooms that used to sour now feel surprisingly neutral. Projects that used to taste metallic now taste like clean water. This is your perception tuning. It is not escape from reality. It is entrance into more of it, without the distortion of your old static. And when the static returns, as it will, return with it to the simplest practice. Breathe like someone who has time. Stand like someone who belongs. Speak like someone who expects to be met. And feel for one full unbroken minute the unremarkable miracle of being safe now. That minute is not a pause between real life and the work of changing it. That minute is the work. It programs the field with a felt signal too coherent to ignore. After enough of those minutes, you will look up and realize the particles have been obeying you for some time. The emails sound warmer. The timing runs kinder. The path that used to dissolve under your feet holds. You didn't hypnotize yourself into fantasy. You tuned yourself into accuracy. And accuracy, in this universe, is love wearing physics. Belief is not a slogan the mind repeats. It is chemistry your body learns to manufacture on command. When people say, "I tried to think differently, but nothing changed," what they mean without knowing it is that the idea never reached the level of blood and bone. The quantum field reads your dominant broadcast, and your dominant broadcast is whatever your nervous system is rehearsing most often. This is why a single clean minute of embodiment outweighs an hour of intellectual intention. When an idea descends from abstraction into breath, posture, tone, and microaction, the body begins to secrete a signature. Hormones shift, muscle tone reorganizes, heart rhythm smooths, and that signature becomes the carrier wave your reality locks onto. You are not faking it. You are teaching the orchestra to play the same song so the particles know which dance to choose. You can feel this translation occur in real time if you pay attention to small hinges. Think of a belief you want to live from. Something deceptively simple like, I am received, I am resourced, or I am safe to be seen. As a sentence, it may float, but bring it into your mouth and let your voice speak it at half the speed you normally use. Feel how the larynx relaxes when you are not rushing to outrun doubt. Notice the breath that moves more fully when you are not stealing air between clenched teeth. That one change of cadence begins to alter the ratio of stress chemistry to presence chemistry. Cortisol stops flooding indiscriminately. Oxytocin edges in. Adrenaline yields to a steadier current. The field does not need you to memorize theory. It needs these physiological proofs. It listens to the body's choir and organizes matter around the song that choir sustains. Behavior is the visible residue of this inner acoustics. When your chemistry stabilizes around a belief, your choices stop arguing with your intentions. You email sooner because procrastination is no longer serving as a buffer against imagined rejection. You ask a clearer question because your diaphragm is not braced for impact. You enter a room and your gaze lands where collaboration can happen because your pupils are not dilated by threat. None of this requires heroics. It requires sequence. State first, chemistry second, behavior third. Get the order wrong and you will keep trying to purchase results with strain. Get it right and action becomes an honest extension of who you are being, not a performance trying to convince the field you have changed. Embodiment is not all posture and breath. It is also environment, because your surroundings are mirrors that train your biology whether you consent or not. A cluttered desk that whispers unfinished becomes a metronome for shallow breathing. A chair that keeps your hips locked forward tells your spine to negotiate with gravity instead of partnering with it. Light that tires your eyes by late afternoon persuades your nervous system that dusk has arrived and your best hours are behind you. The mind calls these details trivial. The body calls them instructions. When you tune the space around you to the state you choose, quiet order instead of visual noise, a chair that invites length instead of collapse, light that wakes your eyes without harshness, you are not decorating. You are programming your transmitter so it can hold the signal longer without fatigue. One of the most overlooked portals into embodied physics is gait, the way you cross distances. Most people walk as if trying to arrive before they are allowed to belong. Their stride chases their center of gravity, breath lagging 2 steps behind. Try something else for a day. Let your steps finish. Let the back foot truly leave the ground only after the front foot has claimed it. This one change will feel almost ceremonial at first, but watch what it does to your timing. You begin to enter conversations a fraction of a beat later, which is often the exact beat that opens rather than interrupts. You arrive at thresholds with the physiology of someone who expects the room to meet them, which rooms tend to do. Your calendar will not note this as an achievement, but particles are exquisitely sensitive to rhythm. A coherent gait is a broadcast of inevitability. Voice is another lever. Not the theatrical voice you strap on for presentations, but the daily voice, The one that orders coffee, leaves a voicemail, asks a favor, says yes, says no. Drop it one register closer to your natural depth without pushing. Lengthen the out-breath before you begin a sentence. Leave a sliver more air at the end than you think you need. This is not manipulation. It is alignment. A steadier voice reduces micro-threat in the people listening, and human particles reorganize in the presence of lowered threat. You will notice less interruption, fewer defensive tangents, more information volunteered that would have remained hidden. The world didn't suddenly become kinder. Your biology stopped telling it to brace. Skeptical parts of you might protest that chemistry and behavior cannot change a bank account, a diagnosis, a deadline. But humility cuts both ways. You cannot guarantee outcomes by embodying a state. Yet you cannot deny that outcomes are filtered through the state you embody. A coherent body makes better phone calls, writes clearer proposals, sleeps deeper, chooses cleaner food, interprets setbacks less catastrophically, and recovers faster. Over weeks, those tiny derivatives accumulate into trajectories that look suspiciously like luck from a distance, and obviously like craftsmanship up close. Embodiment gives probability a bias in your favor. None of this requires you to be a monk. It asks for devotion measured in minutes and micro-corrections. Before you open the laptop, one breath that tells the heart, "We are not at war." Before you reply, one scan of the jaw that releases the bite you didn't know you were carrying. Before you say yes, one check with the belly to confirm the yes is not a plea. Before you say no, one softening of the shoulders so the no arrives as boundary, not blade. These are small particles. Collect enough of them and watch form obey. Perhaps the most compassionate truth about embodied physics is that relapse is part of the rehearsal. You will forget. You will wake to old chemistry. Find your spine collapsing into an antique version of you. Hear your voice speed up around someone who once made you small. In that moment, do not recite brighter sentences over a body that thinks it is drowning. Give it air. Name what is happening without drama. I am in a field I used to collapse. Then change one particle you can change. Your breath, your stance, your tone, and let that particle recruit the next. You are not dragging yourself from darkness to light. You are adjusting the dimmer by degrees until the room makes sense again. When belief lives in the mind alone, the world keeps asking, "But who are you in your body?" When belief lives in your chemistry, the world understands without translation. Doors do not open because you have become special. They open because matter recognizes a signal it can trust. At that point, effort stops being a plea and becomes participation. You are no longer trying to convince particles to rearrange. You are moving inside a field that already chose. You began this journey believing reality was something you entered each morning like weather you couldn't change. Now you can feel what was always true. The weather was taking its cues from you. The field you carry, your breath, your cadence, your posture, your quiet decision about who you are, precedes the facts and invites matter to behave accordingly. Particles are not distant dots in a lab. They are the emails that soften, the doors that stop resisting, the voices that meet you where you stand, the timing that arrives with an elegance too consistent to call luck. When your inner music stops contradicting itself, the world knows the dance. Nothing about this asks you to deny pain or pretend certainty. It asks you to place cause and effect back in their sane order. Feel before form, coherence before conversation, state before strategy. On the days you forget, there is no penance, only the next breath returning you to the station you mean to transmit from. If a room steals your voice, reclaim it with an exhale. If an old story tightens your chest, let your stance widen until the floor remembers you. If doubt knocks, answer it with the smallest honest sensation of relief you can find and hold it long enough to matter. 10 seconds, then 20, then a minute stitched to another minute until the signal stabilizes and the scene obeys. You will notice, as you live this, that life does not suddenly become loud with miracles. It becomes quietly accurate. People reveal themselves sooner. Effort finds its proper size. Work that once felt like a plea becomes participation. Instead of forcing doors, you recognize doors that belong to you and stop bruising yourself against the rest. This accuracy is not magic. It is love wearing the laws of a universe that listens to coherence. And coherence is not a rare peak you climb a few times a year. It is a practice you carry with you in the ordinary places, at a sink, in a doorway, in the unremarkable moment before you speak. So take this with you. The next reality you meet is already leaning toward your current signal. Choose it on purpose. Breathe like someone who has time. Stand like someone who belongs. Speak like someone who expects to be met. Then watch, with a calm that feels like home, as particles settle into the shape you quietly selected. The experiment is no longer theoretical. It is your day, your body, your voice, your field, deciding first, so that the world can follow.